Hey there, thanks for tuning into Duckbricks. I'm Chris, and welcome to another Top 10 LEGO Ninjago video, where over the years, really starting off in 2012 was our first LEGO Ninjago mech. LEGO has been putting out a ton of different types of Ninjago mechs every single year. And in this video, we are going to be summarizing the top 10 best, in my opinion, Ninjago mechs ever released, from 2022 all the way up to 2023. Now here on the wall, you can see a selection of pretty much every single Ninjago mech ever made, and this is the Samurai Mech that started it all in 2012, and you can see just how much they've improved from here. Going into the modern era, right directly behind you, you can see even more Ninjago mechs, with a lot of them from the villains faction, but also for the heroes as well, including what I've also have over here, which is a custom little mech, which of course isn't going to be factored in the video because this is a custom alternate build of Zane's Ice Dragon creature and not an actual set. Besides this though, everything else that you see here are brand new Ninjago mechs from all around the years, and I hope you enjoyed this top 10 countdown of what I think are the best, and of course, do let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree. And so without further ado, let's get into number 10. Okay, coming in at number 10, we have the Kohls Earth mech from the Ninjago Legacy Thunder Raider, set number 71699, which came out in 2020 for $50, although it's not really a fair comparison because this mech was part of a 2-pack which attached to the Legacy version of Jay's Thunder Raider. The original version of this mech came out in 2014 for Ninjago Rebooted, and it was alright. I mean, the proportions were very simple, didn't really have much articulation, but it was okay. But then Legacy came along and they gave us this really nice smaller style of mech, which actually does have articulatable knees and full articulation for the feet as well. Now, this might be a surprise to some people to have it appear on the list because it is pretty small and fairly inconsequential. The reason why I wanted to put it on is because I feel like I always was a fan of the proportions of Kohls mech from the rebooted line. The original one used Technic panels to make up the shoulder pads here, and this one is using a combination of some of the classic LEGO Space windscreen elements molded in black, as well as just a few other pieces that are curved to form the shoulder pads here. I like how the arms are mounted. You have the click joint here, and the rest of it is mounted on a ball joint. The articulation is a little bit awkward though, I will say, because of the way these arms are mounted, but in general you can get it into cool looking poses. It does have the spring-loaded missiles, so it does have the action feature there, and all in all, this is a major improvement over the original, and I think it really goes to show how LEGO can literally take a kind of throwaway side build from just one random set and turn it into a really good mech in its own right. Obviously, you've got the great articulation here. You can bend the knees fully, so that is a really nice thing to be able to do, and because of that, you can actually get this into a really good amount of walking poses. Like here, you can have it be walking along like so, and it's just really fun to play with, which is why I feel it deserves a spot as number 10 on the list. Obviously though, this is just the smallest one on a long list of many amazing Ninjago mechs, so let's move on to number 9. At number 9, we have another mech 2-pack, although I am focusing on just one of the mechs from that set. This is the Mechanstein Ghost Mech from the Titan Mech Battle, set number 70737, which came out in the summer of 2015 and retailed for $60, although it did come with a smaller Zanes Mech Battle, as well as a little encampment in the Samurai X cave. So this would probably be around, I would say, $30 to $35 if it were to come out back then, just on its own set. Now, the reason why this is on the list is that despite this being one of the more rudimentary mechs that LEGO was doing back in the Possession timeframe, again, this was still 2015, and LEGO kind of perfected mech design a little bit later than that. This is just such a really good evil version of the original Nias Samurai X mech, where you can see they actually did a lot of detail and attention to detail in terms of making sure that the two mechs, when compared with each other, are clearly just one being a possessed version of the other. You have the same railroad pieces being used in the original 2012 Samurai X mech, the same dome piece being used for the head, but instead of the samurai crest, you have this ghostly bat wing on the top. The hands are built in a very similar fashion, at least the top hands here, the same way the armor is done on that original mech is done here, and overall, this is a really good evil version of one of the Ninja's original mechs, and that's probably why I like it so much. Now, this is very limited in terms of articulation because the legs are basically just straight rods, and I think that's my least favorite thing about the Mechanstein is that you can't actually bend the knees, but even though you can't bend the knees, sometimes there are fixed mechs legs which actually look a little bit better than just two straight rods. I mean, This is literally just a straight rod. There's no attempt to even make it look like it has fake knees, and I think that really does hurt the posability because the way the feet are mounted is that you can't actually move the feet back and forth too much because they wanted it to be stable, so you cannot really get into a walking pose. I mean, I guess if you have one foot off the ground, but it still looks like almost kind of like a minifigure in the way the legs are set up, and I definitely would have wanted to see a little bit more articulation from the legs. That being said, it is still very cool to have a four-armed mech. I think they had expert use of the CCBS bone elements from the Bionicle, G2, and Hero Factory stuff they were putting out around the same time. So you can see it has the forearms here, and you can get the arms in pretty good poses because if you really wanted to, you could change around the way that this looks to kind of make it look like it's attacking or whatnot, or have all the swords out, or have the kind of full transformation pose like this when it was being possessed by the ghosts. All in all, it's a really good looking mech. I like the aesthetics of the Ghost faction. The transparent green, dark blue, and the spring yellowish green was a really good choice for this mech, and it does look really good. I mean, it does even have the jetpacks that the original one had, which is a very nice touch. I just feel like it is very simplistic, especially compared to what's about to come later on the list. With that, let's move on to number 8. And coming in at number 8, we have set number 71702, the legacy version of the Golden Mech, which released in 2020 for $40 US. And thankfully this was the entire set, so all $40 pretty much just goes into this mech and a few minifigures as well, although this was the main attraction. This is obviously a remake of the 2013 Golden Mech, which was alright for its time. It definitely could have been a lot better and is pretty rudimentary by today's standards, although this one, the Legacy one in 2020, was a major upgrade to the original, and it was really cool being able to actually put together a more modern version of the mech that still stayed true to the general proponents of the original design. Moving in closer to the way the mech articulates here, yes, this does have knees, and no, I'm not just putting all the mechs that have knees on here. There are plenty of mechs on this list that do not have knees, but I do really like how you can articulate the knees and the feet as well. Sometimes when LEGO does put in knee articulation, it makes it so it's nearly impossible to move the feet, but you at least have some amount of motion back and forth, and you can of course move them side to side, so you can get this into all sorts of action or walking poses like this, where you have one knee really splayed out. Just a really cool looking mech to be able to pose. Now, I always liked the color scheme of the original mech being predominantly white and gold. I felt like it made a lot of sense to be the fighting suit of the first Spinjitzu master, and having this be the main color scheme, it almost is more like a Wu color scheme than a Lloyd one, because it is the gold and white, which do make sense because it was the first Spinjitzu masters. Now, going on to the back here, it is fairly plain. You just have the studs on the back, but you can articulate these backwards and forwards. These are on nixle joints, although you can't really do much with them because, I mean, I guess you could bend it forwards if you wanted to, but for the most part you just kind of use it to rotate up and down. But I do like that they included these particular blade pieces. The original one only did have a couple of them, so it's nice to see 4 on the entire back here rather than just 2 kind of on the side. Now, one thing that I really liked about the design of the original one was the conical hat that kind of mimics the Sensei Wu type hat on the top of the mech. I thought that was a really interesting way to differentiate the mech amongst other Ninjago offerings, and it does of course return here. Obviously a lot of the credit is due to the original design from 2013, but this one is just objectively better, and for $40 it was actually a really good value at the time, especially that you get a big looking mech here with full articulation in the knees and the elbows as well. You can move them around. That was kind of unheard of because that was just a really good value. I mean, I would have expected if this were to come out today, it would probably be close to 50. So value was good and the overall design and aesthetic was very good. What else can I say other than this is another Ninjago mech winner? But with that, there are still many more mechs on this list that I feel like even top this one, so let's get into number 7. Coming in at number 7 is a set from the LEGO Ninjago movie. Released in December 2017 as part of their second wave, this is set number 70656, Garmadon, Garmadon, Garmadon. That is simply the name of the set, like the civilians screamed when they saw it approaching from the water, and this was Garmadon's massive shark mech that he used kind of in the first part of the movie before it got destroyed early on. Now, The reason why this is a little bit lower on the list, despite being a really good set, is that, honestly, it doesn't really feel like a mech to me. I mean, sure, it is objectively a mech. It's got the robotic details, it's got the robot legs, and it is a fully mechanical thing, but this kind of feels like it could be a cross between a large brick-built shark and a mech. So it definitely is a very unorthodox style build, although it is a very fun one to put together. Just not maybe personally my style for a Ninjago mech, but it is still a really good set. And when it came out, it was $80, which I remember a lot of people are feeling were very overpriced back in 2017, but now in 2023 sure feels like a bargain. Funny how things change. The way that the function works is that you twist the gear on the back here, and that just opens and closes the jaw. When I first saw the gear, I was really excited because I was hoping it would have a few more functions for having such a large gear, but no, unfortunately you just kind of use it to open and close the jaw. Doesn't really do anything else, but it's nice they do have that feature. Of course, they could have very easily just left it automated just by your hand, just moving it up and down, but I like how they actually made it a function that you control from the back here, because that just adds a lot more fun to the set, and it does have that very satisfying chomp motion to it when you close the jaw and open it again. Now, the legs do not have a ton of articulation. You can move them on ratchet joints here. However, that doesn't really give you much. I mean, that works. You can have it in a stomping pose like this. That actually works out really well. I'm surprised they were able to make that work in terms of just using one ratchet joint to lift one foot up and then having the claws go forwards and kind of act like it's walking. One of the most impressive details to me as this set has is using these scoop elements. These are kind of used for the Toy Story 3S claw as well as construction site claw pieces as the feet or the toes of the mech. That was a really interesting choice to use for this particular model, and I think it paid off really well because it really does feel completely unique. There unfortunately is not a ton of interior space here. There is a compartment for a gunner, which you can see right here, that just kind of rests above their head, Star Wars Y-Wing style from the Clone Wars, and there also is a bit of a cockpit for Garmadon himself to sit inside the head, but otherwise this does not really have any other interior space, and most of it is just dedicated to the details, like the gills on the side of the machine here, and you've got like the Garmy type sign for the sticker there, and it does have propellers, so I guess the main point of this is that if you want, you can rotate the propellers back, and maybe guess you can angle the feet back as well, and this kind of acts as a submarine. So it is a multi-purpose model. You can use it as a submarine as well, and this is really fun to kind of swoosh around and pretend it's swimming. The only thing that I think just kind of makes it be lower on the list for me is that the Ninjago movie shark villains were always a really weird faction to have for the villains for the movie. I never really understood why they didn't do something more traditional to Ninjago, like the original plan was for snakes or even skeletons. The Shark Army just feels very odd and kind of random to me, and to be honest, I just don't really see this as a Ninjago mech. Maybe some other theme it would make a lot more sense, but as a Ninjago mech, having a predominantly shark-focused build just feels very odd and just not really within the style of the other Ninjago stuff. Still, that being said, it absolutely is a big part of the movie and a very iconic build, and it is a very, very fun and satisfying build to put together, and it's just so much fun to play with as well. With that though, let's now move on to some other LEGO Ninjago mechs. Picking the number 6 slot was actually really hard because I feel like starting from now, I generally am a big fan of pretty much every single mech that comes on this list. And it was really, really hard to rank them, but I had to. So coming in at number 6, we have the Ninja Ultra Combo Mech. It released just last year in 2022, retailed for $90 US, set number 71765. Now, at first glance, this mech may seem like a little bit goofy in the color scheme and very jumbled. It doesn't have knees. You might be wondering, well, why is it so high on the list? Well, obviously it is the Combo Mech, and the entire gimmick behind this mech is that it can separate out into multiple different vehicles, one for each of the original Core 4 Ninja, Kai, Jay, Zane, and Kohl, and each of them have a vehicle representation here, some better than others. Let's take a look first at the articulation and general design of this mech. So, you've got these large driller hands on the sides. I mean, technically in show canon, this is Pixel's mech, so, you know, that's all hers, but you can move the arms up and down. 2022 introduced a new mech joint piece, which is really nice because now you can have the ratchet joints up on the arms without it actually having an issue of having a very long Technic bar pointing one way. You also have the legs, which can move back and forth with that new ratchet joint as well, but the legs are really just vertical sticks. I usually complain about that more, but given that this is a combo mech, and I mean, they put some sort of effort into making it look a little bit angled, like it does have knees here. I definitely don't think it's that bad. And obviously the main focus of this mech is that it can, well, split up into different mechs, and it's a combination of different vehicles. One thing first about the articulation, I was actually surprised how you can kind of get it into a walking pose. I mean, you have to be really careful because it's not stable at all, but if you mess around with it, the feet actually do move. I was surprised they only mounted the feet on like 2 ratchet joints there, but for the most part, it does move pretty okay. You've got rotating hands, you've got the middle hands as well, like so, and yeah, for the most part, not too bad for an overall mech, even just in this form. But obviously the main point behind it is that it splits up, so let's just showcase what that looks like right now. So, split up, here are all the individual vehicles of the Ninja Ultra Combo Mech. We have a driller car for Kohl, which makes sense. I mean, obviously the Ninja of Earth. We have a lightning jet for Jay, who typically does get a lot of jets in other sets, so I think that makes a lot of sense. You have a standard mech for Kai. This is probably one of the best parts of the set, is that this mech is actually really good on its own. Sure, the legs are over-engineered for what they need to be, but I mean, this is really good. I really do like how this does have a good amount of articulation. Would have been nice if this did have knees, because I mean they definitely probably could have included knees and just folded them backwards, but I understand the clip pieces are used to hold on the other vehicles, and it does have a really solid amount of articulation from elbows. The hands even rotate so you can pose around the sword whatever way you want. Yeah, Kai's mech is easily the best part of this middle section of the set. And Zane's, I guess, like snowplow, this is easily the weakest one, although to be honest, I don't know what else they could have done with just like converting feet. They literally just took the feet and used them as a snowplow and put treads on the side, which, you know, to be honest, I don't know what they could have done other than that. So I guess it does make sense as a snow or ice themed vehicle. And yeah, just the entire concept of being able to put a set together and split it up into 4 different parts is really fun and easily the biggest selling point of the set. Is it the best looking mech when it's put together? Definitely not. Does it have as much articulation or play features as some of these other mechs? Not really, unless you detect this as a play feature, which it definitely is, but I mean, otherwise it is a fairly standard mech without a ton of articulation. And yeah, the big selling point is just being able to split it up, which I think is worth it because this is just so cool when split up. But with that, we can now move on to our halfway point because this was only number 6. This may be a bit of a controversial choice, but hear me out. Coming in at number 5 is what many people say is their favorite and the best Ninjago mech. This is a set from 2022 from the Ninjago Crystallized Wave, set number 71775, Nias Samurai X Mech, which retailed for $120, came with a ton of exclusive minifigures, as well as a little bit of a Vengestone Dragonoid, but of course the main build was just this mech in and of itself for $120. Maybe if you count all the figures in the build as 20, this is close to 100, so this is easily one of, if not the largest Ninjago mech ever. But the question is, how good is it? Now, I'm going to be completely honest, I am not the biggest fan of the color scheme of this mech, and that may just be my personal opinion. If you like the color scheme a lot more than I do, you might be inclined to think this mech is a lot better than I think it is, and that's totally fine. However, I just feel like the large red X just feels a little bit out of place to me, and unlike the combo mech where the multiple different colors actually served a purpose, this just feels like it has one too many different types of colors in the mech itself. Maybe if they made the X black, I don't know, they really did want to make the Samurai X part of it stand out, but this mech is trying to factor in the azure color of Nia's watercolor scheme. It's also trying to factor in gold and black, which obviously looks really good on a mech. I don't know if it makes that much sense to be on Nia's mech in terms of the black and gold, and then you throw in the red. Just the aesthetics of it just aren't really that good to me in my opinion. The head as well feels a little bit awkward. I mean, I don't really know what the face is of this mech, and I know that one of the biggest complaints that folks have had is the head just looks really weird in terms of comparing it alongside other Ninjago mechs. That being said, this is number 5 on the list for a reason, and it is still on the list of the best Ninjago mechs because despite my reservations about the color scheme and how it looks, this is really fun to play with. First of all, this is one of the largest mechs ever that actually does have knee articulation. As you can see here, the knee is mounted on 3 different Bionicle style ball joints, and you can move those back and forth like this, and that has full articulation for the knee. So that is really well done. Unfortunately, again, because of that, much like other knees, whoops, parts are falling off of this just willy-nilly. It is, I mean, fun to play with, but wow, things are just going to keep falling off if you're not careful. It does feel that the articulation is a little bit limited in terms of being able to move the feet around because of the way that the knees actually move. Let me go ahead and put all these pieces back here. I do feel like some of these parts could have been attached a little bit better. These windscreen pieces are really easy to knock off if you just accidentally press on this part. Like if you press here, that's just going to pop off. So a little bit annoying how when you're playing with it or trying to move it around and articulate it, parts just tend to fall off here and there. But for the most part, it is very articulatable. You can get this into all sorts of crazy poses. Could this have used maybe a little bit more stability? I mean, yeah, but I can't really complain because it is still one of the largest mechs that does even have knees whatsoever. The arms themselves are mounted again using that new 2022 joint. You have good elbow articulation. The hands are mounted on ball joints, as what makes sense. And you also have these shoulder pads that are mounted on mixile joints with spring-loaded missiles on the inside. So if you do want to have missiles launching from the shoulder pads, you can also have that. Now, the way that the cockpit works is that this entire part just opens upwards to reveal a pilot seat inside, so that is actually a good amount of space for the interior of the mech itself. I just feel like this could have used maybe just like one more iteration to be perfect because they got really close. This is a really fun mech to play with. First of all, you can get it into all sorts of good poses. I just feel like the color scheme is a little bit weird to me, and there's a few things that feel pretty fragile about it, like the windscreens being used there, and then just pieces that do fall off from time to time. You have the X, which is also pretty fragilely mounted on just 2 kind of skeleton arm pieces, and all in all, I feel like in order to play with this, parts will just kind of fall off, and that has been my experience with just messing around with it. I don't even play with it too much, just kind of moving it around and just having different poses and articulation. Things will just tend to come off. That being said, it is number 5 because this is a feat of engineering. Whether or not you like the color scheme or don't, I mean, I'm kind of in the camp that isn't the biggest fan of the color scheme, this is a really well-built mech. The knee joints are really well done. I am very impressed by how they were able to actually give a mech of this size knees. I think this is the largest Ninjago mech that does have knees, so that is really well done how they did that there. And overall, it does look really good on display. It is a very fun mech to play with. Just feel like it could have been a little bit more stable, and that color scheme could have been a lot better. I honestly wouldn't have minded if they just went back to the original Samurai X color scheme of like the dark red and the more samurai-esque vibe, because I feel like that would have been a really good color scheme to give to a mech like this. Overall though, I think we've about summed up our thoughts on this, and let's move on to number 4. And for our number 4 pick, we have a pretty recent LEGO Ninjago set. This is Zanes Titan Mech. It just released this January in 2023, and it was set number 71785, retailing for $80 US, featuring basically just the mech and a little bit of a side build for the villains as well. This is a great entry into the Titan Mech lineup, where LEGO has been giving each of the ninja a Titan Mech, starting with Lloyd, and then Zane for Legacy, and now Jay has one for Core, and it is very, very unique, and that is probably the best way that I can describe this model. The proportions of this are unlike any other Ninjago mech that has come before, and to some, I know that there are a lot of folks who feel like it is a little bit too strange. For me, I feel like this perfectly toes a line between feeling very unique as a LEGO build, but also definitely feeling like it fits within the world of Ninjago. The most distinctive part is, I guess, the braid or the hair piece back here. A lot of people can think of it as maybe like a power cord I've seen online. Some other folks think it's just like a detail or something aesthetically. For whatever it is supposed to be, I think it is really well done, because it really does feel like a completely unique part of a mech. We've never seen anything like this before in LEGO shape, because I mean, this is just such a unique thing for LEGO to give us this very strange, like, braided piece. Don't really know what the deal is. Of course it comes off like doing it, right? Like, of course it comes off. I don't really know what the original intent was supposed to be for that particular cord, but I think it looks really cool. It almost gives it an anime-inspired, like, hair type thing for the mech itself. If you manage to get the links to stay up, it does feel pretty curved and it does flow with gravity, so that is a really cool thing to see. And everything else is very interesting in the way the mech is done. The proportions are very unique. You have very lanky, long arms. The torso is bent at a permanent angle. As you can see here, the way the torso is built has it permanently bent, which is super interesting. This does have knees, so you can actually move this around like so. So you can move the knees like that. Unfortunately, this is one of the ones where it does have knees, but they don't really give you much to deal with because you cannot move the legs literally at all. I mean, they may as well have been fixed. Like here, you can't move the feet at all from the joint. You can rotate them like this, that is one way you can do it, but you cannot move them back and forth, which kind of negates the purpose of knees, because if you can't have that foot leaning forwards, then you can't even get it really to stand up with the feet planted on the ground in a walking pose. Sure, you can kind of approximate it by having it balanced, but it's not quite the same as having both feet on the ground. Now, in terms of the way that this is built otherwise, I really like how you can swap out the weapons on this particular build. First of all, you have a really large sword, which is the largest sword ever in a Ninjago mech. I really like the aesthetics of the swords as well, where they have little lanterns with tassels sticking out the bottoms of them. It just really feels completely unique, again, for a Ninjago build. And you also have the successor to the Technic competition cannons, or I guess they're now the system competition cannons, that are the spring-loaded missiles that are mounted on the back here, which are really good and add a lot of dynamicism to the way these shoulders work out. If you want to, you have two swords on this side, which you can use to swap out as alternate weapons. Each of the swords can be held in the hands, which are mounted on ball joints, so it's really cool to see those hands being done there, and I like how it kind of feels like it has gauntlets with the white pieces being used on these sides here. Overall, this is a really good looking mech. I like how it does something completely different. Jay's never gotten a big mech like this before, so this is absolutely one that really does stand out as being completely unique. And while I do feel like some of the other mechs on this list are just a little bit better than this one, this is easily one of the best mechs we have gotten in years, and it definitely shows. I certainly hope this set is successful because I want to see Titan Mechs for Cole, Nia, and Kai, because so far only Zane, Lloyd, and Jay have gotten them in that order. With that though, let's now move on to our top 3, because there are still 3 mechs that I feel top even this brand new one from 2023. Our number 3 pick is set number 70676, Lloyd's Titan Mech. Released in 2019 for the Season 11 Secrets of the Forbidden Spinjitzu wave, this retails for $80 US and pretty much was just focused on the main mech. And while this was in 2019, before knees and mechs were getting commonplace, I will say this is probably the pinnacle of what LEGO could do with mechs back in the day when it came out, and it absolutely is even better than some of the modern Ninjago mechs that still come out. The only thing that would have made this literally perfect and probably the number 1 pick is if it had knees, but let's investigate the articulation a little bit more. Now, I may be a little biased here because I love the way this was depicted in Season 11. Despite the season itself being fairly rocky, this mech was easily just one of the coolest looking parts of it, especially in the ice chapter, having it be wandering through the snow, and you can actually articulate this to quite a significant degree, surprisingly enough. First of all, the legs are just mounted on the standard ratchet joints, and yeah, it was before they introduced the new style of 2022 ratchet joints, so you still have that awkward Technic beam just sticking out of the back, which obviously was something they just couldn't avoid back then with those pieces, but I love the way the legs themselves are built and shaped. Even though this does not have knees whatsoever, it looks like it does, and it bends just enough to give the suggestion of knees without compromising on stability. You have the wheel pieces here with a transparent red lightsaber blade sticking through to suggest some glow to the internal mechanics of it. It isn't just a solid straight rod for the legs. You can see there is clearly 2 different segments, which do feel like, again, it has the simulation of knees. The shaping is really good on the way the thighs are done, especially here and here, going on down to the ankles and the feet, and overall, I think the color scheme and blocking of this model is really good. You can move the legs, or the feet, side to side like so. It is using good use of the friction add-on piece introduced in Hero Factory in 2012. So sad that piece is discontinued now, but you cannot really rotate the feet back and forth. However, since it doesn't have knees, that doesn't really matter because you're not going to need to rotate it back and forth. In terms of the hands, it has pretty perfect articulation. You have a ball joint for the elbows, so you can move the elbows around however you want. You can rotate them on a ratchet joint right here, the Knights Kingdom style click joint, and you also have two different weapons. You have the buzzsaw here, which you can spin up, and it looks really satisfying when that is actually spinning up like really fast. That just looks really good when it's spinning, so I really do like how that looks as a weapon. Obviously this was used a ton in the TV show. I remember it like chopping stuff like that, so that was obviously maybe a little biased there because it looked really, they made it look so cool in the show. And you do have the big sword here as well, which you can swing back and forth. Just a simple sword, but I think it looks good for this mech to wield. I do like the way that the shoulder armor is done, where you can have the option to rotate them on two different axes, so you can have them maybe sitting more up here if you want the more bulky samurai-esque look, or you can have them rotated downwards to give it a bit of a different look. It just depends on the aesthetics of the model and how you want to make it look. I personally prefer it when it's a little bit bulkier on the top, so I do like keeping it like this, which is overall pretty cool. The head does come right down. The minifigure sits right here, and it does come right down on the minifigure, so that is pretty good to see here. And you do have a detachable jet. This entire thing does detach as a jet. Wasn't seen or used in the show, but it is cool that they have that extra play feature of these being detachable, and as they are right now, they do just look like ornamental wings, or maybe even like a cool back attachment for the mechs. So overall, I do really like the aesthetics of this model. And I think even though there are some other mechs on this list that arguably were more playable or maybe are a little bit better built, like maybe Jay's Titan Mech is the better build, I love the color scheme here of the sand green, white, and gold. It just looks so good, and for a Lloyd mech, it isn't really even that green. It's not just like all green all around or bright green. It feels just a little bit more grounded in the way that it has these little mech kind of armor pieces here with the white and the sand green being layered on top of it. I don't know if this was intentional, but I like the little bits of red. It almost kind of feels like Akita's color scheme with the white and the red, just little red highlights on the top there, and overall, just it looks really good, and I think aesthetics are one of the most important things for a mech, so having the body be shaped really well, the legs are done in a really nice and satisfying manner, and it does have very cool looking weapons and is very playable, this is easily a good pick for the top number 3 spot on this list. But there are still 2 mechs that I feel top even this, so let's move on to number 2. No matter how you feel about the LEGO Ninjago movie and the storyline, you have to admit that the LEGO Ninjago movie sets were some of the best Ninjago sets we have ever gotten, especially for 2017, where they were still kind of figuring out the general design for mechs. And I think easily the best mech to come out of the LEGO Ninjago movie was set number 70632, the Quake Mech, retailing for $90 US in December of 2017. This was Kohls' main vehicle for the Ninjago movie, and I'll have to say, probably one of the most unique designs for a LEGO mech that they have ever done, bar basically none. I mean, across any theme, this is probably the most unique. And obviously there's a big reason for that, and that is that it is a massive unicycle style mech. It does not have legs. Instead, the way you play with it is you kind of lift it up here, or you lift it up here, and you just roll it around. And this is so satisfying to play with. You can really get a lot of action poses with it. If you want to kind of have it be rolling in one direction, you rotate it this way, and it's just so fun to play with. I think the playability of just going along the floor and rolling this along is easily one of the best playable mechs out of the entire Ninjago line. There's a reason why it is number 2 on the list, and that's because it is so fun to play with and just so good overall. Now, in terms of the rest of the design, obviously there's no leg articulation to speak of because it has a massive wheel instead of a leg. Surprisingly, I was wondering how on earth would they ever do this as an actual LEGO set. I was so excited for this, and they were actually pulled it off really well. You just have a kickstand on the back it leans on the back of, so when it's not in use, it is perfectly stable like this, and when it is in use, you just lean it forwards and you roll it along, which I think is a really good way of doing things. Overall though, the rest of the positioning of this mech is very nice. I like how they were able to actually give it arm articulation despite how large and bulky the arms are. They are using the massive Technic kind of turntable style gear here with some friction gears on the side, which makes a lot of sense. Unfortunately, I think the worst part of the set is that it looks infinitely better when the arms are raised like this, but then, as soon as you let go, just if you move it around a little bit, they will just always flop back down to being perfectly straight. It would have been really nice if they had just a stronger joint to be able to leave it up, like just like this would have been perfect, but if you move it a little bit, like these are just going to fall down. So they don't stay up, and especially if you're kind of picking it up to play with and whatnot and kind of putting it down, these just like this, like, will not stay up. Like, if you can see here, this is not staying up. So that was a little bit disappointing to me. I really do wish that that was a little bit easier to have put in a better pose, because I would have rather just been able to position it like that. But I still think that even without that, it looks really good. Now, the action feature here, because Kohls' one defining trait in the movie was that he liked music, and that was really the only thing that he did in the movie, was that you can lift these upwards and they become speakers. So it's super simple. They just fold outwards and you have a massive speaker mech. So I guess that's how you emanate the Earth-like shockwaves here. You also have good articulation on the sides of the hands. Early concept art showcased that these things on the side were also supposed to be wheels, and it would kind of roll on the ground by having its arms on the ground, I guess like this if the wheels were bigger. Obviously they changed that to make it just a unicycle style of mech, so they did try to factor these still into the original design, but I guess here they're more armor pads or speakers rather than wheels themselves. Folding it up is very simple, and you do have fully articulated fingers, which is very nice to see on the mech itself. I do like the overall design and look and feel of the build. And for the cockpit, you just have it swing open, and you do have the records on the inside, because again, Kohls' defining trait was he likes music, so you can spin the records to control the mech, which I think is a pretty cool way of controlling it overall. Basically, this is at number 2 because of the sheer ingenuity of giving a Ninjago mech a massive wheel to roll along that was just so cool and so different from anything we've seen before. And this was almost at number 1 if there was not just one other mech I feel is better. But this is really, really good. Honestly, one of the most fun Ninjago mechs to play with overall. I spent countless hours just rolling this along the floor when I first built it, and I really hope that Ninjago will continue to do stuff like this, which breaks the boundaries of what could be considered to be a mech. This is so good. I love it. One of my favorite Ninjago mechs, but there's one even better, so let's now move on to the one we've been waiting for. Number 1, the best, in my opinion, Ninjago mech ever made, and this may surprise some people. Okay, at number 1, we have the LEGO Ninjago Legacy Zanes Titan Mech Battle, set number 71738, retailing for $65 US, but at the time of recording this video is currently on sale for $55 US at most places here in the US. This was a reimagining of the original Zanes Titan Mech from the Season 5 Possession Wave in the summer of 2015. It was the original mech that faced off against the Ghost Mech, which we saw earlier in this video, although this has basically all of the budget put into the set just going into the mech in general. Releasing in 2021 for the 10-year anniversary of Ninjago, I think this is the best Ninjago mech ever, and here's why. So first of all, the way that this is built has a very unique construction and color scheme. While the original Titan Mech honestly wasn't that interesting in terms of a build, the legs were basically straight rods, the torso was really simple, and I guess the most interesting about it is that it was one of the only mechs to feature sand blue. This goes above and beyond to really reinvent the set and make it feel a little bit different. The torso itself almost has a skull or face carved into it in the shaping, which I think is done really well. Designer Tooth Dominoes really went above and beyond to make this stand out from the original set. But easily, the most impressive thing about this set is that yes, it does have knees, but they're not built in the way you may expect, because as you can see, you can rotate these knees back and forth, and this is a very strong connection. This is done really well, and this actually is using not 1, not 2, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different mixel joints being used in different configurations to form the way the knees work. Let's zoom in and see exactly how these function. So, first of all, you have these kind of ball joint elements that were used in the Marvel mechs rotating back and forth, so they go back and forth like here. These two pieces are mounted on 2 mixel joints on the inside. You have another set of mixel joints here and here, here and here, and on the front as well, making the way this works almost like jointed by, like quadruple jointed in the way everything moves for the knee itself. It is so satisfying to see the way that this entire piece works, and out of all the mechs Ninjago has done, these are somehow still the strongest knees. I don't know why they don't just do this on the larger mechs, because it is basically the perfect knee design. You have also, I mean, you could layer it triple the side if you wanted to. You could put 3 of them on there instead of 2, and just have basically a ton more joints if you wanted to, so I don't know why they don't do it on larger mechs. But it's just done so well here, and that knee design was revolutionary. I just wish they applied it even more than this. The feet themselves can move a little bit. I mean, at least you can angle them back and forth to a significant degree. Not a significant degree, but to some degree. You can move them side to side quite a lot, and I love the inclusion of the beehive pieces molded in the gunmetal gray to act as booster jets on the side of the legs there, which is just a nice little added detail that is protected by some flaps. Now, the rest of the mech is also done really nicely because you have full articulation on the elbows. These are mounted on ball joints, so you can move these back and forth. You've got a similar razor saw to Lloyd's Titan Mech, although I will say this one isn't as satisfying to spin up because of the way it's mounted. The piece it's mounted on does tend to have a little bit too much friction, so you can't actually get it spun up without it just stopping, but it is still nice as a similar weapon. And on the other side, you have a very similar weapon to what it had on the original mech, where this kind of flips backwards and forwards to allow you to use it in different combat situations. The arms themselves can be rotated back and forth and all the way outwards because of the way these shoulder spikes are mounted. You're not fixed like this, you can actually rotate the arm this way, and the armor piece just kind of moves outwards, so that's pretty perfect. Obviously you have to reset it when it's done, but I think that is a really nice way of doing things. And I think my favorite part is that the head is actually mounted on a mixel joint, so you can actually get different types of articulation on the head, looking back and forth and up and down. It just looks so good, and I love the way the head is built. I think the head construction on this is one of the best. It's very simple. It is basically just using a slightly modified version of the original 2015 design, but just using those angled flag pieces kind of look like cheekbones, and it just looks really good overall. I'm a big fan of the way this turned out. You have these missiles mounted on the spring or ratchet joints back there, so you can kind of angle those up and down on the click joints. Obviously those are just the standard spring-loaded missiles, and overall, this is just so much fun. It's easy to play with. No pieces are really going to fall off that much when you play around with it. I mean, I've been pretty rough with it. I've been moving it all around. I've been trying to get it in all sorts of different poses and whatnot, and nothing is falling off. It is very stable, unlike some of the other mechs on this list. You can very easily pose it. There are no restrictions on the posing really whatsoever. Even the thing I was most worried about, which were these spikes on the sides of the shoulders when I was first seeing images of the set, isn't even a problem because you can move it outwards and just have those go up. So everything about this is just so good. The color scheme being sand blue, the kind of lighter aqua blue as well as white does look really good. I'm a big fan of the way the color scheme turned out. And overall, this is just such a good, solid build. It is probably the gold standard for Ninjago mechs. And I also think the reason why it is on this list is the price. This retailed for $65 just a couple of years ago. That's kind of unheard of. For a mech of this size, I would have expected at least 80, maybe even 90, because it is a big mech. There's a lot going on here. But for $65, this is one of the best priced Ninjago mechs. It is easily the best built, in my opinion. Even before they introduced those new knee or like kind of articulated ratchet joints, it still works really well. And I do tend to want to modify a lot of my Ninjago mechs and make them a little bit more stable or have more articulation. But this is the one Ninjago mech where I feel that it doesn't need any modifications. It is perfect as is. And that's why I feel that this deserves the top #1 spot of best Ninjago mech ever made. Alright, and with that, we have summed up our look at my top 10 favorite and what I consider to be the best Ninjago mechs ever made. Of course, you are free to disagree or agree, so let me know down in the comments if you think anything was missing, if you feel like I snubbed any mechs, or maybe if you think any mech was included on the list that you don't think should have been included. Of course, this is a lot of things boiling down to personal preference, and definitely those top 3 mechs were really hard to choose which one would be #1, #2, and #3. I had a hard time making this video because it was so hard. They are all so good, but I hope you enjoyed this top 10 LEGO Ninjago list. Thank you all so much for tuning into Duckbricks. Be sure to like and subscribe for even more LEGO news, reviews, discussion, and analyses coming your way very soon. Thanks so much, and bye for now.